Hey everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and this is episode 59 in the series. It's the one where we get sheep. That's right, we have sheep out in our back pasture, and I can't wait for you guys to meet them and hear a little bit more about them. But there's a lot of other stuff going on in this episode. It was my birthday last weekend, which is why I didn't podcast on time, and instead I uploaded the sleeve cap tutorial video, so I hope you enjoyed that last weekend. It is also a time of many babies. Not for me, but my husband's son, my stepson Phineas, and his wife Erin are expecting a little girl in August, and my friend in Ireland, Albina of LB Hand Knits, is expecting a little one. So I've been busy doing a little baby knitting, which I'll show you. Those are my FOs for the week. And it is also an episode about lots of darning. That's kind of like one of the things we're going to talk about. I have a book for you in our rare and hard to find book series. I have a sweater the dog ripped up, and yeah, so we'll get to all of that, plus dogs and sheep, and oh yeah, we have a bunch of chicks in the garage too. So it's a little bit like farm life around here. It's getting kind of crazy. Let's see. First things first. Welcome if you're new. It's lovely to meet you. We do have a Ravelry group over in Ravelry. It's under Knitting the Stash, and you can check out what's all the chatter going on over there. You can introduce yourself, and there are lots of different threads going on. We're in the year of modification, so we've got a knit along going along for modified garments, and you can check that out over there. So welcome if you're new. And if you're coming back, it's so nice to see you. And if you're coming back, you know from episode 1 that this has been quite a journey, from like learning to knit to learning to spin to making my own yarn and dealing with fleece and learning about sheep to now having sheep. So it's kind of an exciting time. And let's see, where can you find me? You can find me just about everywhere as Knitting the Stash. On Instagram, YouTube, obviously, on Ravelry, and on the blog, which is knittingthestash.wordpress.com. And I put all the show notes over there. So if you're ever looking for something, information, book titles, all that kind of stuff, I keep it over there on the blog. So I'm guessing the first thing you guys want to hear about are the sheep, of course. So I'm going to insert some footage here and kind of talk over what you're going to see, hopefully. So basically my friend from the guild, the Spinners and Weavers Guild in Champaign-Urbana, has a lovely flock of sheep. She's had some long wools over the years. She's had, now she has Corriedales and Teeswaters and Corriedale-Teeswater crosses, and they're actually the sheep from which the next yarn is being made. So the yarn is in the process of being made right now over at Stonehenge Fiber Mill up in Michigan. And I've been talking to Kathy since we got this place about maybe getting some sheep. And the other day she texted and said, hey, you know, my flock is kind of big and it would be great to have some of them break off and come over to your pasture. So she came out, checked it out. We have everything fully fenced now. We have a barn that's completely functioning, and so she said, hey, do you want 6 to 8 to 9 sheep over here? And we said yes. It took us about 10 seconds. So she trailered her sheep, brought them over, and everything happened so quickly. I don't have footage of that. But she brought over 7 sheep. A bunch of them are named. They're all second year sheep, well, half and half. There are 4 second year sheep who have all had lambs, and then there are 3 yearlings who are about a year old this time around and have not had lambs yet, so they don't have names. So the 2-year-old sheep are Violet, Splenda, Mouse, who's the little one, and that you'll see in the pictures, and Cindy Crawford. So they're really quite adorable, and they are here for about 3 months, I think, to get them on pasture, so that they're not in the barn. You know, they're off their grain and hay and all that kind of stuff right now. Because it's beautiful summertime, summer pasture, lots of good grass, and we happen to have 2.5 acres out beyond the dog fence. So they're living out there, and they spent the first couple nights in the barn, and now they're just staying out overnight in the pasture because they told me basically that they're big enough that we don't have to worry about predators out here. We do have neighbors on 3 sides, Some of them have dogs and things, but we are fully fenced, and the sheep are big enough and scary enough that I guess, you know, a coyote wouldn't want to go for them. So that's what Kathy and Ken said, and we're going with it. I've been checking in with them. The sheep all seem to be pretty healthy. Sometimes shifting sheep from hay and grain diet in the winter to fresh pasture in the spring and summer can bring about some kind of digestive stuff for them. But they're all doing really well, and they seem pretty happy and healthy out there. They tend to graze in the mornings, in the early morning and in the evening. And during the heat of the day, we're keeping them out of the barn because we don't want them laying around in the straw and messing up their fleece and all that good stuff. So they are kind of hanging out in this really shady column of trees over there. They have a lot of nice shade, some fence posts to rub against, and they seem pretty darn happy. And they come when you call them, and they like corn, and we're learning all about their little quirky personalities. And I had just about the best moment the other night. The first night they were here, the dogs are not sheep dogs, obviously. They haven't been trained as guardian dogs or anything like that. And they're fairly unfamiliar with large animals. So having sheep appear in their backyard was kind of like, whoa, you guys have there, do you guys know there are big dogs out there? So I was kind of standing over on the little mini orchard that we have, taking care of a fence, and I looked up and it was twilight. And it was this beautiful light, and I thought to myself, oh my god, if only I had a camera. But it was one of those moments that you just kind of like capture in your heart and you just never forget. And I looked down the fence, and Millie was kind of sitting on the fence looking at the sheep, and she had just gotten really quiet all of a sudden. And the sheep, in all these comics that I see about sheep, they're always in this kind of phalanx form where there's like one sheep in the lead, and then they're kind of like fanned out like a military air force, you know, like installation. And it's actually just true, it's not just in the comics. So Millie's up against the fence and she's gone completely quiet, and this phalanx of sheep just come over and they meet in the middle and their noses touch, and they just, everybody starts wagging and they're so happy and noses are licked, and it's just like this twilight moment. And I was just like, it was amazing. It was so cool to see that. Like, I love seeing little moments when species kind of come together and communicate, and that was definitely one of those moments. And since then they've been much more at peace. Millie likes to bark and play because she just does, but the sheep tend to come over to the fence and say hi to her, and she loves to go over there and lick their noses. Tink is not as interested. She'll go and lick their noses, but she's kind of like, sheep. She's much more into the chickens that are in the garage. So that's our sheep story, and like I said, hopefully I've put some footage in here while I'm talking so that you can see the actual sheep and see the pasture. And yeah, so we've got that going, and that happened on Thursday. And on Friday morning at 4 a.m. we got a call from the post office that our chicks were here. So we now have Cornish hens that Spencer's going to process later in the year in the fall. And we have a big group of layers that are going to be with us for a couple of years. So we're building up a chicken coop out there, gonna get them outside. Right now they're just day-olds, 2 or 3 day-olds in the garage under some heat lamps. And yeah, we've raised chickens before, so this is maybe the 3rd or 4th time we've had chicks. It's been a little bit of a gap between the years, so there you go. So this podcast is definitely still about knitting and spinning, I promise. And I hope beginning with the sheep helps you get a sense of like the full cycle of yarn. I'm really into that kind of thing. As many of you guys know who've been watching for a long time, I like to know where my yarn comes from. I like to meet the sheep, and now we have our own sheep, and they happen to also be the sheep from which the new yarn is being created at this moment. So it's all pretty cool kind of cycle of life and yarn here for you. So that's our sheep story, and maybe we'll move over to some knitting now. So I'm gonna switch over and grab my stuff. So I promised you guys birthdays and babies, and last Sunday was my birthday, and I turned 40, which I think is a pretty momentous, awesome occasion. I'm excited about, I'm always excited about moving on and up in life, and hope that, you know, experience follows with age. And I'm pretty excited about going into the next decade to check it out and see what's going on. As far as I'm concerned, it's the new 20. It's all good. But it also means that a lot of other younger folk, or folks that are my age, are having kids, and it's different stages of life for everybody, right? So my son is 15, my stepson's gonna be 23 this summer. And he's the one actually who is just gotten married and is having a baby. Well, his wife's having a baby in August. So I got busy knitting, and what I knit up is this cute little kimono, which I'll show you the pattern first. This is the kimono, and it is by Karen Burrell, and it's a pretty adorable little kind of a unisex sweater that's really easy to put on and off, I think, for someone who's going to have a new baby. So I knitted up in Miss Babs and Tanis Fiber Arts in superwash yarn, because I know I love Phineas and Aaron, but they're going to have their hands full and they're not going to be hand washing baby clothes. So this is the kimono. It's a really adorable, cute knit, and it's one of those knits for babies when you think about it. Like, you want something that's easy to get on and off. And I figured they've got a lot of stuff coming to them for the kind of younger, the dogs are going crazy over there. They've got some stuff coming to them for their younger months, and so I wanted to do something that would be a little bit older and maybe fit the baby for a little bit longer. So this is an 18-month-old size, and I think it might even, depending on how big the baby is, it might fit, you know, anywhere between when she's like 1 year to 2 years old. So that's my hope. The dogs are wrestling completely now. The dogs have been wrangled. I will resume podcasting. I was showing you the kimono. So, like I said, I made this in the 18-month-old size, and it has a lot of nice details to it, which is one of the reasons I chose it, aside from the ease of use. So it has these 2 buttons, and I wish I had like a little baby mannequin model so that you could see this kind of stuff, but I'll open it up and then you can show it to you. So it has 2 buttons. One is internal here, and that's for this flap of the garment, and then one is over here in the armpit, and that is for the other side of the garment. So it creates that kind of wrap style. There you go. Creates the kind of wrap style. It's a top-down, cute little sweater. I think it would be adorable pretty much for anyone, including babies and adults and toddlers. It's a top-down sweater, and it has some raglan shaping. It has these faux raglan seams, because basically they're just yarn overs that you're adding in to make it look like there are these raglan seams, since as you do your increases on the way down. And then it's finished with this garter edge down here, and the cuffs and the neckline are all applied I-cord. And as I said, the yarn is Miss Babs, and this was a Miss Babs Yummy 3-ply with minor flaws that I got at one of the holiday sales, like around right after Christmas. Miss Babs usually does a big sale, so you can usually get a lot of her yarn at pretty good discounted prices. So this is the 3-ply, and does it have a color on it? It doesn't, because it has some flaws to it, so I don't know if it has a color. But this is a Miss Babs superwash. It's a sport weight, and I just love the color. I have 2 skeins of this in my stash, and I've been trying to stash dive more lately just to try to use up the yarn that I have. So this, like I said, it's superwash. I don't normally knit garments out of superwash, but for baby stuff, it makes a lot of sense, especially if you're sending it as a gift, because this can be machine washed, basically. If it accidentally gets machine washed, it's not going to ruin it or make it tiny or anything like that. And then the yarn that I used for the details is the Tanis Fiber Arts, again, a superwash sport weight. And I'm not sure what the colorway on this one is either. It came in one of her sample packs that I got a long time ago, maybe back in 2012, something like that, 2013. And she has these great sample packs. She still has them available. This was one that was like jewel tones, and it had an array of like beautiful blues, purples, reds, all the way down to a brown and a yellow, all in this kind of beautiful jewelly kind of colorway, or tone or hue. I'm not good with the color terminology. You guys know what's going on. So I saw these 2 and I thought they would be good together, and it turns out I was right. So in the finished garment, I think they look quite nice together. So this will get shipped off to Phineas and Aaron very soon. We're gonna go down and visit them once the baby's born. Okay, the other knit that I did, as I said, was for my friend Albina in Ireland. And this is just one of a couple little things I'm sending in a care package to her. This is her first baby, and I don't know if it's a girl or a boy, so I just made something that I thought would be kind of cute and adorable, and we'll just hope for the best. And this is another cute little baby knit. This is the cabled vest, and I think it's just absolutely adorable. I made this one in a much smaller size. So I made it in the purple, which I think of as a kind of royal color, which can go either way for boys or girls. And the pattern for that one comes out of this book, Knits for Babies 0 to 18 Months by Susie Hoffman. And this was actually gifted to me a while back by some friends who just, you know, they had a knitting book and they didn't knit, so they were like, find somebody who knits. So here's the cabled vest. And their version of it uses the Isager yarns. And that's one thing that I wanted to make sure I replicated, was this kind of woolly look to it, because I think that really woolly look is beautiful. And the X's and O's on the cable pattern are just really cute. So I knit this one up in Outlaw yarns, and I'll show you that yarn in just a minute. I think you can see the detailing. Yeah, there's the light. So it has a cute little Henley button top there. And it has this beautiful like cable detail, and I think you can see the yarn there. It's got this really great woolly kind of vibe to it. Same on the back, the cabling continues on the back. And it's knit in 2 pieces. You knit the front and you knit the back, and then you seam up the sides. So I'll show you my mattress stitch seaming work, and hopefully it'll come out on the camera so that you can see it. There it is. So that's my seam down the side. And I think it turned out really well. This is a beautiful little glass button that actually Albina sent me a while back, and I thought it just looked absolutely perfect with this little woolly garment. So let me tell you a little bit about the yarn. This is Outlaw yarn, which is the Bohemia worsted, and it's 45% Polwarth, 45% alpaca, and 10% possum. And this is their tag. Now, there are plenty of controversies about possum yarn, just like there are controversies about superwash yarn and lots of other things. This is the actual yarn. It's really very soft, incredibly kind of drapey and woolly at the same time, which is a nice combination. And I actually only used about half a skein to make that little garment, so I might just have to make another one or something else, because it's just so incredibly soft. And that's the Polwarth, the alpaca, and the possum mixed together. The possum controversy, I'm not going to go into it in detail in this episode. We'll talk about it in another episode. But it is one of the fibers that comes from animals who are killed before the fiber is harvested. And that is in part because this particular yarn, the Outlaw yarn, comes from let me get it right here, New Zealand. I'm trying to get it right because in New Zealand, possums are an invasive species, which is why they're managed, which means culled and killed, and then their fur is harvested so as not to be totally wasteful about the whole thing. They're not an invasive species everywhere, but they are an invasive species in New Zealand. So you can imagine there's a certain kind of controversy about this yarn and the use of possum in general. And like I said, I'd be happy to talk about it on a future episode if anyone's interested in hearing some more about it. What is cool about this yarn is that it is incredibly soft, and possum is incredibly warm. It is one of the warmest fibers out there. So only putting 10% in something like this will make it incredibly warm, and it's actually very soft. It does have a little bit of this halo going on, which I think you can see. You can see it better on the garment itself. And this yarn came to me from Sarah, who is in Australia, and she and I did a fiber swap. And one of the things I asked for was possum yarn because I don't have any in my stash, and I was very curious about it given what I've kind of learned about it or heard about it with all of the animal management practices. So I think it's worth kind of checking out and learning more about. And like I said, I would happily talk about it on another episode if you guys are interested. But what I will say is it makes a beautiful garment. So I will be sending this warm and woolly little cabled vest off to Albina. And Albina, I suppose if you're watching, it ruins the surprise just a little bit, but there'll be some other awesome things in your package that you don't know about. So there you go. Some surprise and some not. So those are my two FOs for the week, two little baby garments. And I have the Rumo sweater that I did the sleeve cap for. It just needs to be finished up, and I've started another test knit now for Albina. So more sweaters are coming, more adult size sweaters are coming, I promise. All right, let's move on to the next segment, which is all about mending and darning, and it's part of our rare and hard to find book series. So let me set this up for you. Okay, so for those of you who are newer, you may not know, but this podcast this year, what I've been trying to do is every cast to have a rare or hard to find knitting or spinning book, and to kind of talk about its content and show it to you so that you can decide if it's something that you want to invest your money in, or if you want to try to find a copy yourself. Some of my books have come from estate sales or guild sales, so I've gotten these books at a discounted rate, and they're from folks in the guild who have been knitting or spinning for going on maybe 40 or 50 years. So the collection runs deep, and I'm really happy to share it with you guys. And today's is all about darning, actually. And I posted on Instagram, I think about a week ago when I was in Colorado. I was looking through an old magazine that Spencer's mom had out from 2000, and it actually had a little story about darning in it. And the story mentioned this book by Wayne Muller. And it's called Darn It, History and Romance of Darners, and it's a price guide as well. So I just started looking around, and it wasn't as rare as some of the books that we talked about, but it could be quite expensive if you can't find a used copy. I think I got my copy for, I want to say $10 on eBay, but it's from 1995, and it is both a little bit of a history of darning and a price guide to a bunch of darners. So if you're interested in darning and thinking about darning, this may be a cool book for you to get your hands on. So let me tell you a little bit about the book, so you can decide if it's something that you're interested in pursuing yourself. So it has 4 chapters that are kind of about history of darning, stockings, and the history of darners, darning eggs and mushrooms themselves. And that's about 15 pages of the book. And then the other 150 pages of the book are all a catalog of the most beautiful, interesting darning eggs that you could ever imagine. So tons and tons, pages and pages, all kinds of different information about the types of darners out there, the countries that they come from, the years that they were made, whether or not they're fancy or really more rustic and kind of homemade. And there are some that are glass, there are wood ones, there are these really beautiful glass blown ones that have all kinds of color added to them. So each of these has information on the facing page about where they came from and any kind of like provenance for them, like what their story is. So tons and tons, like I said, 150 odd pages of these darning eggs, and here are some of the more rustic, kind of more wooden darning eggs. So you get a good sense, and here are some of the mushrooms that are really quite cute. You get a good sense of the variety that's out there. And apparently Wayne Muller and his wife started collecting them, and that's partially why they have so many and have photographed so many and have learned the history of so many of them. And they just have their own collection of these beautiful darning eggs and darning mushrooms. So between that and reading a quick article that I'll put the link to in the show notes, I was trying to learn a little bit about darning and the history of darning. And I was reading through the initial chapters here, and he and this other article talk a lot about darning as kind of obviously a utilitarian kind of a thing, but the word darning often also implies needlework, so things like embroidery, and not just mending. But in this particular case, he's often talking about the fixing of garments. But he's talking about a range of kinds of darning, not only socks, but undergarments, hats, mittens, gloves, you name it, it could be darned. And there's also a lot of discussion. I thought one of the more interesting things, not in this book, but in that quick article I read, was just the invisibility of darning as a kind of historical work that women did. And that's because a lot of the museum collections that have textiles have often gone back to take out the darned sections so that what you have is the original garment rather than the garment that includes the darns. So there are some collections and museums that are working to preserve the darning history and types and styles and all the different work that women did. But often, and I think this is a historical practice and maybe less contemporary, the problem was that museums weren't preserving the actual darning work. There's a lot of question, and he talks about this in those first couple chapters, about comfort for the wearer. Like, should you darn on the inside or the outside of the garment? Is it all about showing it off so that if you take your shoes off, your sock looks nice? Or is it about darning on the inside so that your sock is really comfortable to wear? And there are different styles of darning. So, you know, sometimes people will just do like they call it rigging it, I think, in here, where you just kind of like sew around the hole, pull it tight, and just create either a ridge or a knot. And you kind of like sew over the top of that. And you can imagine how uncomfortable that would be if that were on your toe. So there's some talk about like, where should the darns happen? Should they be inside or outside the work? Are they meant to be visible? All that kind of good stuff. And then I thought the other interesting thing that he talks about in here is where the term egg actually comes from. And so the first darning eggs, apparently, he talks about them being actual eggs. So let me find the reference here. It's page 17, and he says, the term egg is certainly most appropriately applied to darners inasmuch as our resourceful predecessors did, in fact, use eggs as darners. They carefully blew out the contents of chicken eggs, duck eggs, goose eggs, and turkey eggs, and filled the empty shells with plaster to give it additional strength. There's no record of anyone using ostrich eggs, nor of anyone having feet so large as to require the darner to use something the size of an ostrich egg. Wisecracks of early day comics notwithstanding, there's no evidence that darning eggs were laid by sewing birds. Right? But the problem with the plaster-filled eggs, as it turns out, is that if you dropped them, they would crack and you would no longer have a darning egg. So some say the story goes that a very resourceful woman went out to the chicken coop and found one of the glass eggs that was used to kind of entice the chickens to lay eggs in a nest, and took that inside and used that as her darner, and that's where the glass egg for darning was born. I like the story. It seems pretty good. So if you're interested in the history of darning eggs, darning mushrooms, a beautiful collection of them that you just like to look at, this is a great book. And very fun to read and very fun to just look through, kind of like a coffee table book. And I will tell you, one of the reasons that I've been interested in darning lately is that the dogs got into my sweater. We left them alone one day. I had the sweater up on a high table and I thought it would be safe, but it's one of my favorite sweaters, my Ilias sweater. And look what they did to the button band and the buttons. So sad. So I will be doing some darning of my own, perhaps make a little video of it for you guys. This really sad thing is that I only have one spare button and I need 3 because I chipped off 3 of them. So if any of you happen to know or have this particular button, it's a plastic button with a shank, it's got some texture on the front. If you happen to have it just lying around, you're like, oh, I've got a couple of those. Please let me know. I'm like putting the call out as far and wide as possible to try to get a couple more of these buttons so that I can fix my sweater with them. Otherwise I'll have to just sew all new buttons on, which is totally possible, but not my preference, as I searched far and wide for these buttons. So that's darning it. And the other thing I mentioned, by the way, is there are plenty of folks on Instagram who do a lot of darning, and they make little stories about it and they share photos of it. So one of my favorites of late is what's her name? Millie the Bee on Instagram. I'll put it down here so you can see her Instagram tag or her name, and you can go follow her if you're interested. She does all kinds of darning and mending, and it's been really inspirational to see her work over the last few weeks as I've been thinking about darning. Okay, last segment for today is all about the birthday giveaway, right? Birthdays are for giving. So I wanted to give you guys a chance to win a couple of different prizes, so let me pull those out. So Debbie, my dear friend from the Guild, donated this kind of mystery fleece to give away, and it is a really pretty, not too crimpy, kind of beautiful mystery. We're not really sure, but you can see it is a gorgeous, gorgeous fleece. It's been washed, and I think there's probably about 8 to 12 ounces of it here. So one lucky winner will get this fleece to spin. So I figure we gotta cover the spinners, and that covers the spinners. The other prize is 2 skeins of yarn from Knit Crate, and this is Vidlandia, that's their line, and it happens to be 48% wool, 20% alpaca, and 32% cotton. So it's kind of a perfect summery yarn, and you can see it's one of these cable-y yarns. It's quite beautiful, and the color is very summery as well. So someone else will win 2 skeins of this beautiful yarn. As always, what I'd like you to do is leave a comment here on the blog or on the Ravelry thread telling me which one you'd like and what you'd like to do with it. What kind of spinning you'd like to do, or what kind of knit project you'd have in mind for either of those prizes. And I will do a drawing in 2 weeks for 2 winners. If you're in the US, great, I can cover postage. If you're outside the US and you'd like to enter, that's wonderful, but I would ask that you cover postage. So that's our birthday giveaway for this particular episode. And yeah, I think that's it. That was a lot of stuff. And until next time, I will be enjoying some sheep and trying to get some stories for you, and I hope you have some fun knitting and spinning projects to keep you busy. Take care, everybody.